My name is Clara, I'm 31, and my own mother called me an attention seeker as I lay in a hospital bed after my sister's betrayal nearly killed me. Before I tell you how I exposed their twisted secrets to our entire town, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The first sound I heard was the steady, rhythmic beep of a machine next to my head. The first smell was antiseptic, sharp and clean, a smell that erases everything. The first thing I felt was the scratchy wool of a thin blanket against my skin. Then, I heard her voice. Not soft, not worried. It was sharp, like a shard of glass. "Look at what you've done," my mother said. I could feel her standing over me, her shadow blocking the harsh fluorescent light. Always the attention seeker. I didn't open my eyes. I couldn't. Her words didn't make me want to cry, they just landed in the hollow space inside my chest and stayed there, cold and heavy. I focused on the beeping. Beep. 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 It felt like the only real thing in the room. But to understand how I ended up there, you need to go back. 10 years back, to a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. I was 19. I had a life that was simple and, I thought, happy. I was a sophomore in college, studying to be a teacher. I had my best friend, Chloe, and I had my boyfriend, Mark. We'd been together since we were 16. He was my first love, my first everything. We weren't anything dramatic, we were just solid. We talked about the future like it was a place we had already bought tickets to visit, which house we'd buy, how many kids we'd have. It was easy. It was comfortable. And I had my sister, Jessica. Jessica was 2 years older. She was everything I wasn't. While I was quiet and preferred a book to a party, Jessica was the party. She was beautiful, confident, and had a way of making everyone in a room feel like they were the most important person there. She was the sun, and for most of my life, I was happy to just be a planet in her orbit. I looked up to her. I trusted her with everything. She was the one I called when Mark and I had our first big fight. She was the one who helped me pick out my prom dress. She was my big sister, my protector. Or so I thought. The day my world broke was a Sunday. It was a perfectly normal, boring Sunday in October. The air was getting crisp, and my mom was making her famous pot roast. The whole house smelled like home. Mark was over, like he was most weekends. We were all sitting in the living room, the sound of the football game droning on from the TV. It was so domestic, so painfully normal. Around 6 o'clock, my dad asked Mark to come out to the garage to help him with his new workbench. Mark stood up, kissed the top of my head, and left his phone on the end table next to me. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? A few minutes passed. I was scrolling through my own phone when his screen lit up. A text message. My eyes barely registered it, but the name on the screen caught my breath in my throat. Jessica. My heart gave a painful thud. A notification from my sister to my boyfriend. Nothing strange about that, right? They were friends. Of course they were. I told myself to ignore it. I told myself I was being crazy. But my stomach was already churning with a sick, cold feeling. The message preview was short, just a few words. Tonight was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Time stopped. The sound from the TV faded into a dull roar. I could hear the clinking of pots from the kitchen, my own ragged breathing in my ears. It had to be a mistake. A misunderstanding. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. I knew I shouldn't. I knew that the second I did it, there was no going back. But I couldn't stop myself. I picked up the phone. My hands felt clumsy, my fingers like they belonged to someone else. I opened the message. The entire conversation was right there. I felt a wave of nausea as I read the words, the casual intimacy, the shared secrets. My thumb swiped up, and I saw it wasn't just weeks of messages. It was months. A whole secret life lived right under my nose. I felt the phone grow heavy, then slip from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor just as I heard the latch of the garage door click open. Mark stumbled back into the living room, a goofy smile on his face from whatever joke my dad had told. The smile vanished the second he saw my face. He looked from my white-knuckled grip on his phone to my eyes, and he knew. The color drained from his skin. "Clara," he started, his voice a weak whisper. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" The words came out low and dangerous, a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "What are you doing, Mark?" Or should I ask, who are you doing? I watched a dozen lies flicker across his face before he settled on the pathetic truth. He couldn't even look at me. His eyes were fixed on the floor, on his shoes, on anything but the girl whose heart he had just ripped out. "It just happened," he mumbled. "We didn't mean for it to. We fought it." "You fought it?" I let out a laugh, but it was a broken, ugly sound. "It looks like you fought it all the way into her bed." 4 months. He had nothing. No defense. No explanation. Just the pathetic, whimpering apology of a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I told him to get his things and get out. He didn't argue. He just gathered his jacket and keys and was gone, leaving a gaping, silent hole in my life. That, I thought, was the worst of it. I was so wrong. The worst was yet to come. The next day, I tried to talk to my parents. I sat them down in the same living room where my life had imploded just hours before. I explained, through choked sobs, what I had found. I expected shock. I expected anger on my behalf. I expected something. What I got was a deep, weary sigh from my mother. "Oh, Clara," she said, rubbing her temples like I was giving her a headache. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a boy. You're 19. You'll have a dozen more before you settle down." I stared at her, floored. "A boy? Mom, he was my life. And she's my sister. Your daughter." My dad, who had been silent up to that point, finally spoke. His voice was firm, disappointed. "Jessica is your sister," he said, his eyes hard. "Family is forever. Mark is not. You need to grow up and see the bigger picture. You're tearing this family apart over a teenage romance." Tearing the family apart? I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. They weren't the ones who had been betrayed. I was. But somehow, I was the one at fault. Later that evening, Jessica came to my room. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open. She stood there, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, looking more annoyed than sorry. "Look," she started, "I'm sorry, okay? I really am. But we have real feelings for each other. We couldn't help it. I thought, out of everyone, you'd eventually understand." The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. She thought I'd understand? She stood there, in my room, in my safe space, and tried to justify stabbing me in the back. I told her to get out. My voice was quiet, but it was filled with a cold fury she'd never heard from me before. For the first time, she looked taken aback. She left, closing the door behind her. The next few days were a blur of isolation. My parents treated me with a chilly distance, their disappointment hanging heavy in the air. The real poison, though, started to seep in from the outside. Jessica's smear campaign had begun. It started with a text from my cousin, Amy. "Hey, heard you and Mark broke up. Jessica said you've been really unstable lately. You okay?" Unstable? The word hit me like a slap. Then came a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. She didn't ask for my side of the story. She just gave me a lecture about forgiveness and how I was always so sensitive. Jessica was painting me as the villain in my own tragedy. She was telling everyone I was possessive, hysterical, that I had driven poor, sweet Mark into her loving arms. And they were believing her. My friends stopped calling. People would see me on campus and quickly look the other way. I was being erased, rewritten as a crazy ex-girlfriend, while my sister and my ex-boyfriend were being painted as star-crossed lovers. I was completely, utterly alone, trapped inside the walls of my own home, with the architects of my misery. The world went gray. That's the only way I can describe it. The colors just faded. I stopped going to class. What was the point? I'd see people whispering in the hallways, their pitying glances feeling like tiny stones being thrown at me. So I stayed in my room. The four walls became my entire world. Sleep was a place I hid, but even my dreams were filled with their faces, laughing. My phone stayed silent. The silence was a constant reminder of how completely I'd been cut off. My parents acted like I was a ghost in their house. They'd leave a plate of food outside my door, never knocking, never trying to talk. It wasn't concern, it was an obligation. It was their way of saying, "We are doing the bare minimum. Now please continue to be invisible." Jessica and Mark were a public couple now. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that they were so happy, that they had never felt a love like this. Every word was a fresh twist of the knife. I was sinking, and no one was throwing me a rope. In fact, it felt like my own family was holding my head underwater. And then, they handed me an anchor. It happened on a Tuesday. A sterile, official-looking envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me. It was from the bank that managed the trust fund my grandparents, George and Eleanor, had set up for me and Jessica. It was our college fund, but it was more than that. It was supposed to be the start of our adult lives, a nest egg for a down payment on a house, or to start a business. It was our future. The letter was vague, something about a routine account review and a request for a meeting to discuss the current administrative oversight. It felt strange. I'd never gotten a letter like this before. A knot of pure dread formed in my stomach. I went online to check the account balance, just to soothe my own paranoia. The screen loaded. I typed in my username and password. And then I saw the words that made my blood run cold. Access denied. I tried again. And again. Same result. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. This was wrong. This was my account. I called the bank, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was transferred to an account manager, a man with a tired, bureaucratic voice. I explained the situation. He cleared his throat. "Yes, Ms. Miller. I see the account here. There's been a petition filed regarding the administration of the fund." A petition? What does that mean? Who filed it? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, due to privacy policies, I can't disclose that information. However, a request has been made to transfer fiduciary control, citing concerns about the beneficiary's current emotional and mental stability." The phone felt heavy in my hand. Fiduciary control. Beneficiary. Stability. The words swam in my head, but the meaning was brutally clear. They weren't just satisfied with taking my boyfriend, my friends, and my dignity. They were coming for my future. My sister and my parents were trying to legally declare me unstable so they could take my inheritance, the money my grandparents had set aside for me. It was the ultimate act of erasure. They weren't just trying to ruin my life now, they were trying to steal the life I was supposed to have later. That was it. That was the moment something inside me finally snapped. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I was consumed by a white-hot, silent rage. They thought I was unstable? They thought I was a ghost? Fine. I would give them a ghost. I would give them something to remember. I opened my laptop and started a new blog. I didn't have a plan, I just started typing. I poured all of it out, the text messages, the lies, my parents' cold dismissal, the smear campaign, and now, the final, unforgivable betrayal of the college fund. I attached screenshots of the texts Amy had sent me, the ones quoting Jessica's lies. I wrote for hours, my fingers flying across the keyboard. It was the longest, most honest thing I had ever written. It was a testament to my pain. It was my suicide note. When I was done, I read it over once. It was all there. The ugly, brutal truth. I didn't want my story to die in silence. I wanted the truth, my truth, to exist somewhere, even if I didn't. I hit schedule post and set it to go live in 3 hours. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can ever know. Just comment the number 1 and then listen to what happened next. With the post scheduled, a strange calm washed over me. It was done. The truth was armed and aimed. The silence in my room felt different now. It wasn't empty, it was waiting. I went to the bathroom and found the bottle of sleeping pills my mom kept for her occasional insomnia. I remember thinking how ironic that was. I swallowed them with a glass of water, the action feeling detached, like I was watching a movie. I lay down on my bed and closed my eyes, expecting. I don't know what. Darkness, I guess. Peace. The next thing I knew, there was chaos. A voice was screaming my name over and over. It was a familiar voice, but it sounded frayed, torn apart by panic. Chloe. My best friend. She was supposed to be away for the weekend with her girlfriend, Maya. But she'd forgotten her favorite jacket, the one she couldn't live without. She'd come back for it. The rest is a blur of disjointed images. The flashing red and blue lights painting my bedroom walls. The feeling of being lifted, of strange hands on my body. The shrill wail of a siren that seemed to be coming from inside my own skull. I remember seeing Chloe's face, pale and streaked with tears, as they loaded me into the ambulance. She saved my life because she forgot a jacket. Sometimes I think about the terrifying fragility of that. I woke up in the hospital. For a second, I was just adrift in a sea of white sheets and beeping machines. Then, it all came rushing back. And with it, her voice. "Look at what you've done," my mother said. Always the attention seeker. This time, my eyes fluttered open. She was standing there, my father beside her. They didn't look worried. They looked annoyed. Embarrassed. Like I was a mess they now had to clean up. The doctors had told them what I did, what I had almost succeeded in doing. And that was their response. Not "We're so glad you're alive." Not "We're so sorry." Just accusation. I turned my head away and stared at the wall. I didn't have the strength to fight, to scream, to even cry. A nurse came in and told them visiting hours were over. I felt a wave of relief as they left. Because of the nature of my admission, I was placed on a mandatory 72-hour psychiatric hold. It was as awful as it sounds. A small, sterile room with nothing in it. A window I couldn't open. The quiet sympathy of the nurses felt worse than the open hostility of my parents. They asked me who they could call, who I wanted to see. I gave them only 2 names, George and Eleanor. My grandparents. They came the next morning. My grandmother, Eleanor, walked in first. Her face was etched with worry, but her eyes were full of a fierce, unwavering love. She didn't say anything. She just came to the bed, took my hand in both of hers, and held it. My grandfather, George, a man of few words but immense presence, stood at the foot of the bed like a sentinel. He just nodded at me, a silent promise of protection in his eyes. They didn't ask questions. They didn't lecture me. They didn't tell me I was being dramatic or that I was tearing the family apart. My grandmother had brought a container of her homemade chicken soup, even though she knew I wouldn't be able to eat it. It was just what she did. She brought comfort in a plastic container. They sat with me for hours, in the humming silence of that room, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. They didn't bring guilt. They brought soup. And in doing so, they provided the first real anchor for my recovery, a flicker of light in a seemingly endless darkness. When the psych hold was over, there was no question of me going back to my parents' house. My grandfather, George, told the doctor I was coming home with them, and his tone left no room for argument. Their house was my sanctuary. It was a quiet place filled with the smell of old books and my grandmother's baking. For the first few days, I barely spoke. I just existed. I ate the food Eleanor put in front of me, I slept in the guest room under a quilt she had made by hand, and I felt the crushing weight on my chest begin to lighten, ounce by ounce. A week later, Chloe and her girlfriend, Maya, came to visit. Chloe just hugged me, a long, desperate hug that said everything she didn't have the words for. Maya, on the other hand, was a force of nature. She was small, with bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. She had a kind of fiery energy that I'd always found a little intimidating, but today, that fire was on my side. After the initial greetings, Maya put her laptop down on the coffee table. "Okay," she said, her voice low and serious. "We need to talk." I figured she was going to talk about therapy, or my recovery plan. I was wrong. "I saw your blog post, Clara," she said. "It went live right after Chloe found you." I took it down immediately, but not before I read it. All of it. I flinched, feeling exposed. "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Don't be ashamed. You were telling the truth." And after I read it, I got angry. Really angry. So, I did some digging. She opened the laptop. The screen was filled with screenshots. "This," she said, pointing to one, "is a text from Jessica to your cousin Amy, sent the day after you and Mark broke up." She read it aloud. "Just so worried about Clara. She's been so possessive and unstable lately, I think the breakup really sent her over the edge. Mark is devastated." My breath caught. It was one thing to suspect it, another to see the words in black and white. "And this," she continued, clicking to another image, "is her talking to your Aunt Carol. She's making up stories to get attention. She's always been the dramatic one. She was building a narrative, Clara. A calculated, vicious one. But she wasn't done. The part about the college fund," she said, her eyes flashing. "That's what really set me off. My mom is a paralegal at a law firm that does estate planning. I told her the story, without names, and she said what your parents were trying to do is highly illegal unless they could prove you were medically incompetent. They weren't just trying to control your college fund, they were trying to build a case to control your entire inheritance from George and Eleanor one day." A wave of sickness washed over me. It was so much worse, so much more calculated than I had even imagined. "So," Maya said, her voice softening slightly, "I made a call. To our family friend, Linda, who works at the bank. I asked her, off the record, to look into it. She confirmed it. Your mother and Jessica came in for a meeting. They had a letter from a doctor, probably a friend, saying you were having a severe mental health crisis and they wanted to petition for emergency guardianship of your assets. They were trying to use your pain to steal from you." She laid it all out, a neat, damning pile of evidence. The premeditated lies. The financial conspiracy. It was all there. I stared at the screen, at the proof of their treachery, and the last remnants of my grief turned to something hard and cold. It was rage. Pure, undiluted rage. I looked up from the laptop, first at Chloe, whose face was a mask of furious loyalty, and then at Maya, who was watching me, waiting. She wasn't telling me what to do. She was showing me the weapons I didn't know I had. The power had shifted. I was no longer a victim hiding in the dark. I was a survivor, sitting in the light, armed with the truth. My voice was quiet, but for the first time in months, it didn't shake. "Do it," I said. "Post it all. Burn it all down." We spent the next 2 hours huddled around Maya's laptop at my grandparents' dining room table. This wasn't going to be a messy, emotional rant. This was going to be a surgical strike. Maya wrote with the precision of a lawyer, laying out the narrative calmly and factually. She started with my original blog post, framing it as the desperate, truthful account of a 19-year-old girl who had been pushed to the brink. Then, she began adding the evidence. She embedded the screenshots of Jessica's texts, each one a testament to her calculated smear campaign. She wrote out the account from Linda at the bank, detailing the meeting where my mother and sister had tried to seize my college fund, using keywords like fiduciary control and petition for guardianship. She named the doctor who wrote the letter for them. She didn't use inflammatory language. She didn't have to. The facts themselves were a Molotov cocktail. The post was titled, "The Truth About the Miller Family." A story our town needs to hear. Before she posted it, she looked at me, her finger hovering over the mouse. "Are you sure? Once this is out there, it's out there forever." I looked at Chloe, who gave me a firm, supportive nod. I thought about my mother's voice in the hospital. I thought about the words access denied. I thought about my sister's fake apology. "I'm sure," I said. She clicked post. She shared it to the Ohio Town Community Forum, a Facebook group with over 10,000 members. It was where people announced bake sales, complained about garbage collection, and shared local news. Now, it was our battlefield. For the first 5 minutes, there was absolute silence. Nothing but the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It was the most agonizing 5 minutes of my life. I started to think we'd made a horrible mistake. Then, the first notification pinged. It was a comment from a woman who went to our church. "I am horrified. Clara is the sweetest girl. Praying for you, dear." Ping. Another one. A guy who had been in my high school history class. Wow. I heard rumors, but this is insane. Team Clara all the way. Ping. 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 It was like a dam had broken. The post exploded. Within 30 minutes, it had over 100 shares. The comments were a flood of shock, outrage, and overwhelming support for me. People who had known my family for years were publicly denouncing my parents and Jessica. "I always knew there was something off about them," one person wrote. "This is child abuse, plain and simple," wrote another. The carefully constructed facade of my perfect family was being sledgehammered into dust in real time. My grandmother's phone started ringing. It was a friend from her bridge club, offering support. Then my grandfather's phone rang. It was the pastor from our church, his voice grave. The fury of the community was aimed directly at its targets. My phone, which had been silent for weeks, suddenly buzzed. It was a text from Amy, my cousin. "Oh my God, Clara, I am so sorry. Jessica told us all you were. I had no idea. I am so sorry." The real climax came around 8 p.m. A car screeched to a halt in my grandparents' driveway. We all looked out the window. It was my parents' car. My mother, father, and Jessica stormed out and marched toward the front door. My grandfather, George, stood up. He was a tall, stoic man, and at that moment, he looked like a mountain. "Stay here," he said to us, his voice calm and steady. He opened the door before they could even knock. We could hear my mother's shrill voice from the dining room. "How could you let her do this?" she shrieked. "She's airing our private business. She's ruining us. You have to make her take it down." Jessica was sobbing, not with remorse, but with the self-pity of someone who had finally been caught. Everyone hates me. My life is over. My grandfather let them finish. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, he spoke, and his voice was cold steel. Your private business was the systematic destruction of your daughter, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the house. You drove her to a hospital bed, and then you tried to steal from her. You stopped being this family's concern when you did that. This is a private residence. You are no longer welcome here. We heard a click. It was the sound of my grandfather engaging the deadbolt. Then, he turned around, walked back into the dining room, and sat down at the table with us. He looked at me, and his stern face softened. It's over now, he said. And it was. The war was over, and we had won. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for my family. The town we lived in wasn't a big city where you could disappear. It was a place where reputations were built over generations and could be destroyed in a single afternoon. Mark was the first to go. His family were deeply religious, pillars of their own church community. The story of what he had done, now laid bare for everyone to see, was a source of profound shame for them. They pulled him out of the local college within a week. I heard through the grapevine he was sent to live with some relatives in another state, a quiet, unceremonious exile. I never saw or heard from him again. He just vanished from my life as quickly as he had entered it. Jessica's punishment was more of a slow, public burn. She tried to brave it out for a few weeks, but she had become a social leper. Friends she had known since kindergarten would cross the street to avoid her. She was called names in the grocery store. The confident, radiant girl who could command any room was gone, replaced by a haunted, furtive creature who couldn't meet anyone's eye. After a month of this social waterboarding, she packed her bags and moved away. The last I heard, she was living a few states over, working a dead-end job. The sun everyone had revolved around had finally burned out. My parents suffered the most public humiliation. They were asked to step down from their committees at church. The invitations to neighborhood barbecues and dinner parties stopped coming. My dad's promotion at work was mysteriously put on hold. They became recluses in their own home, the curtains always drawn, prisoners of the shame they had brought upon themselves. My grandparents, true to their word, made the separation final and absolute. My grandfather hired a lawyer. Papers were drawn up. My college fund and future inheritance were placed in a legally ironclad trust that my parents could never touch. The lawyer also drew up documents formally disowning my mother. I remember my grandmother crying as she signed them, not for the loss of her daughter, but for the daughter she had wished she'd had. The divorce from our family was complete. In the months that followed, a quiet peace began to settle over my life. I re-enrolled in my classes for the spring semester. Old friends reached out, apologizing profusely for believing Jessica's lies. I was cautious, but I let a few of them back in. My life was slowly being rebuilt, but on a new, much stronger foundation. The core of that foundation was Chloe, Maya, and my grandparents. One evening, about 6 months after the reckoning, the three of us were sitting on my grandparents' porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. We weren't talking about anything important, just laughing about a stupid movie we had seen. In that quiet moment, I realized something profound. I had lost a family, yes. A sister, a mother, a father. But I hadn't been left with nothing. I had been left with the truth. I had been left with the people who had stood by me in the fire. I had lost the family I was born into, but I had found the one I had chosen. And as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, I knew, deep in my bones, that I was going to be okay. 12 years is a long time. It's long enough for scars to fade into faint, silvery lines. It's long enough to build a whole new life on the ashes of an old one. Today, I am 31. I am a wife and a mother. My husband, David, is a kind, steady man who knows every broken piece of my past and loves me not in spite of it, but because of the person it forged me into. Our daughter, Lily, is 3. She has my eyes, but she has a fearlessness that is all her own. Our fridge is a chaotic collage of her crayon masterpieces, and our home is filled with her laughter. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And she will never, ever know the toxicity I came from. My chosen family remains the bedrock of my world. Chloe is Lily's godmother, a constant, loving presence in our lives. We weathered an unimaginable storm together a few years ago when we lost Maya. A car accident took her from us far too soon. I remember standing with Chloe at the funeral, holding her up as she sobbed, 2 survivors clinging to each other in a new wave of grief. We miss her every day, but her fierce, loyal spirit lives on in the life she helped me reclaim. My grandparents are older now. My grandmother Eleanor still bakes, though her hands are a little shakier. My grandfather George had a stroke last year. He's mostly bedridden, and his words are few, but his eyes still light up when I bring Lily to visit. She'll hand him her favorite stuffed bear, and he'll hold it gently, a small, heartbreaking smile on his face. Through all of this, the marriage, the birth of my daughter, Maya's funeral, my grandfather's illness, the silence from my parents and Jessica has been absolute. Not a card, not a call, not a single word. Their silence used to be a weapon they used to hurt me. Now, it is a gift. It is the confirmation that I made the right choice all those years ago. It proves that some people will never change, and the only thing you can do is change the locks. Sometimes, late at night, I think of them in that big, quiet house. I think of my sister, who I heard is now a single mom to 2 kids from 2 different fathers, struggling to make ends meet. I don't feel the hot rage I once did. I don't even feel the cold satisfaction of revenge. I just feel nothing. They are strangers who share my DNA. My life isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about survival. It's proof that you can break a generational cycle of toxicity. It's about building your own family, your own peace, your own happiness, and then protecting it with everything you have. I didn't burn their world down to watch them suffer. I burned it down so I could finally have a place to plant my own garden. And it has grown into something beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. It means more than you know to have someone bear witness to it. My question for you is, have you ever had to choose your own peace over a toxic family relationship? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. You are not alone.